Hello, this is Chipinder from grcodejk.com, and I'm pleased to have with me here today Mr. Deepak Klotia from Novel Consulting, an education consultancy that helps students apply to undergraduate, postgraduate, and MBA programs in the United States, the UK, Canada, Germany, and other countries. Welcome, Deepak. I'm glad that you could make the time for this interview. Thank you.
Thanks, Japinder, for having me. I'm glad to help you out, the students, with whatever queries they have. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. So, Deepak, why don't we start by you telling us a bit more about yourself and about Novel Consulting?
Okay. So, to give a very quick summary, first about my own personal background. So, I've studied engineering, done my master's also in US, worked in California, Singapore for 2 years, and then came back with the intent of joining the family business. However, while helping a couple of friends, I decided that this is something I'm getting passionate about and I'm very interested in. So Jimit Jimit is the other co-founder of this counseling firm. We are batchmates from our engineering days. So we were helping a common friend, and that's where the idea came up. We should help students, and we were helping our juniors also in the process. So it's been almost 11 years since we set up Novel Consulting, and over the period, I think we have helped. Last year, for instance, we have helped around 400 students with their overseas education plan, going to different countries for very wide range of degrees, which includes the undergraduate degree, master's degree, MBA, and even some PhD applicants also we have helped. In terms of country, majority of our students are going to all the popular destinations that are there, with US being the most dominant one. And then there's Canada, UK, France, Germany. These are other important destinations that students are going to.
Right. So with this diversity of countries, so thinking from the point of view of an applicant who is considering going abroad, but are still not sure about which country, etc. So how far ahead should they start planning? What should the timeline be? When should they start seriously thinking about their next steps vis-a-vis the applications?
Okay. So when it comes to timeline planning, a healthy timeline by default is 2 years in advance from the date you intend to fly. And I'll tell you why. By default, almost all the top schools, at least in any field, will have a deadline 1 year in advance of the intake, the first round of deadlines, to submit the application for that program. And a year in advance will give you the timeline to prepare for your GMAT or GRE entrance exams or SATs, whichever entrance exam you're planning to take. If there are any eligibility requirements that you're not meeting, for instance, you're coming from an IT background, you want to apply for a core computer science program, and there's a course of operating systems missing on your profile, which is a common prerequisite across all master's degrees. So to meet those prerequisite requirements, also you need some time frame. And then to strategize your profile around the application, do the right kind of research in terms of shortlisting the schools, interacting with students who are studying in your target programs and universities and countries, understanding the employment data of different countries, long-term immigration prospects. Although if you want to give yourself a proper time frame, then a 1 year window is needed from the application deadline. Hence, a 2 year window is ideal, but we have seen students who cram this in 15 months also, 14 months also, apply in the later rounds also. So the lowest, I would say, at least like a 8-month window, and the most maximum side, I would say like a 2 year window.
Right. So people on the lower side would be perhaps people who are working within admissions consulting firms such as yourself, because then they are getting the knowledge boost from someone else.
Yeah,
if you have to figure it out all on yourself, then you should keep a bigger
2 year window. Yeah. And it also depends on the kind of program you're applying to. Being very mainstream, like a master's in engineering, then it's okay if because you are going to do computer science, you are over the 3 years preparing your profile accordingly, you are subconsciously aware about you're doing the right thing. But for something like a top tier MBA program, there are too many profile requirements that go beyond the scope of academics, be it professional achievements, be it extracurricular, community involvement, leadership. So when you want to attain a tick mark on all those parameters, then a proper timeline planning is very, very essential.
Right. So it would be a mistake to think of MBA at the start of this year and then think of applying within 6 years and then make it a do or die that I must get admit this year.
So I would not use the word mistake critically, because every student is different, honestly.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Last year, I had a student who joined us just 15 days in advance of the MBA application deadline. That's I think the shortest time frame I've worked with a student, first round deadline. Because most of the things were already sorted in the profile because he worked in an ecosystem and a corporate setup where he's fully aware about his MBA requirements. So he was in a way preparing a lot of these things. His GMAT was already in place, a high GMAT score. So he came with everything ready. We just had to work directly, get into it and work on the content points, which is the CV, letters of recommendation and the essays. We had to cram that in 2 weeks, and he got admits across all schools, top tier schools that he applied to.
Right, that's actually a great example, Deepak, because I think it highlights that it's all very subjective. We cannot make general statements.
So it's very difficult to make a very general statement. But if you ask me the max timeline, I would say like a 2-year window is perfect. But every candidate is different. Every candidate situation is different. So then only I can make a very subjective comment on what is the ideal timeline. Yes.
Understood. So, again, I'm thinking of this person who came to you 15 days before. I'm sure they would have had the self-confidence that they have what it takes for the schools. So, this makes me curious. How can a person estimate their profile on their own, whether they have it in them for a particular school, etc.? How can one judge their profile objectively?
That's a very, very critical question. And that's where a lot of students falter, in my experience. When I meet so many students, most of them are off point in terms of the target schools or their eligibility for those schools. The best way to do that is through profile stalking on LinkedIn. So let's say my target school is a Harvard MBA, Stanford MBA, Darden MBA, which are the top tier MBAs globally. What I will do is I'll spend at least 1 month stalking people of whoever who have done those MBAs on LinkedIn. You just have to Google Harvard MBA LinkedIn India. And very important key term here is India. What happens if you start looking at US candidate profiles with US citizens, you'll see a substantially different standards of admission as compared to an Indian applicant. By default, India is one of the most competitive applicant pool. If you are holding an Indian passport, means you are working in the most competitive applicant pool. And although none of these schools officially declare a quota, that they have nationality quotas, but it is everybody, when you speak to the AdCom teams off record, they'll clearly tell you that, let's say, we know for a fact in Darden, not more than 33 students from Indian origin get it for their MBA program. Okay. And within that, there are sub quotas of professional experiences also, like 3 from private equity, 2 from venture capital. That kind of sub quotas are also there.
I have a clarifying question here. So, Indian origin, does that also include the Indian Americans?
Yeah, some schools also are clubbing everything because they want to maintain a certain level of ethnic diversity too. So that changes from school to school, whether the passport or the ethnic, but not more than 40-50 students are we seeing in across top schools also that is crossing the Indian origin mark. That's where a LinkedIn profile stalking of Indian, if you're an Indian applicant with an Indian passport, I would do that. And I would at least study 30 to 40 relevant backgrounds. Let's say I'm coming from a financial service sector. I would try to see people with financial service sector and compare my professional career trajectory with regards to their professional trajectory. And then the other academic elements are also there. You have to see which academic institutes they are favoring for your bachelor's degree. When you see across these top tier MBA programs, there's a heavy bias for IITs. There's a heavy bias for University of Delhi for sure. So all those profile parameters, one-on-one comparison with comparable background students will give you a sense of understanding of what are my prospects of getting into that school. So you're not delusional about, because we get some students who are, and I'm not saying no, you'll never get in, but there are some harsh realities that are there across schools. For instance, we had a student with an extremely strong background. She was working with World Bank. And she was working with a lot of global projects, which are high impact projects in neighboring countries also. So that gives you a lot of things to talk about in an application also. And you're a standout candidate because you have a diplomatic passport. The moment you're working for a World Bank, you're traveling to 10, 12 countries in 3-year window. Despite that, she didn't get into Harvard, saying that we generally prefer World Bank headquarters London professionals, but not Mumbai office when you speak to them off record. So there are some of these things that one needs to be more and more aware about.
Right. That's actually a very wise suggestion, I'll say, because what I think people do is they search on Google and then you are more likely to find the outliers or the exceptions. And so that fuels the optimistic thinking. If they got in, maybe I also will. Yes. So, right. So this helps one ground one's expectations.
And just to add a little on that point, all these school websites give you there are two misleading elements in this. The school websites give you some statistics, which are dry statistics like the GMAT average score, GPA average. Okay,
Right.
they don't give you the qualitative parameters behind those statistics. Okay, what kind of institute you are coming on, they never disclose that. What kind of nationalities you are preferred, they don't disclose that.
Hmm.
Okay. And the AdCom, they are paid, they are marketing professionals for the schools. When you talk to the AdCom members on the face value, they'll always encourage you to apply because that's their job to get as many applicants, lower their acceptance rate to stand out in the top B school competition. That's a different element altogether. So, getting yourself well versed with that LinkedIn portfolio is very, very important.
Right, that's great. Okay, so this is a great way to know my kind of people go in which kind of schools. I can get a sense of that through LinkedIn. Now, further then, how should I shortlist my programs? I mean, the optimistic me also wants to apply to what I call these stretch schools, but then what should be a healthy ratio? What kind of mistakes do you see people make in shortlisting their programs?
Okay. So by default, our advisory is to apply between 6 to 12 programs. That's a healthy number. To apply to 6 or 12 depends on the candidate's profile also, timelines that they are working with, budgetary criteria, all those things that we decide. If the candidate is right in the middle in terms of there is some chance, there's not an exceptional thing. Let's say instead of 770, we have a 720 on GMAT, and when you feel everything else is sorted in the profile, the score might be a stumbling block with some of the schools. So in that case, we recommend that, okay, you may want to go up to 10. But if there's a clear-cut situation where you have a very strong candidature for some of these schools, then you may want to go as low as 6 also. Our split is generally very sorted in the sense, and it is subjective. The split, how to compose your university list is also very subjective. If the candidate is coming with a weak background, relatively weak academic or some background for any degree, we recommend a split of, like, let's say if we are applying to 6 universities, 2 ambitious, 2 moderate, 2 safe. If a candidate is coming with a very exceptionally strong profile, then my strategy to them is maybe you apply to 1 safe early on, get that admit in the kitty, and then you can go very aggressive with the ambitious list. Maybe 5-1. Then maybe we remove all moderate in between, or maybe we keep 1 moderate, get that admit, and apply all ambitious. So that again is a subjective element slightly, but by default, 3-way split between ambitious, moderate, and safe is the ideal way to go about it.
Right. And how would that split look for someone who is looking to make a career transition? So let's say a person with a pharma background and they have been working a job in a pharmaceuticals company, a technical job, and now they are maybe interested in data science. Then how do they evaluate their chances of what are their safe schools, what are their stretch schools for that?
Okay, so when it comes to this kind of career transitions, and we get quite a few students with such requirements, I'll give you a couple of examples. We had a student who is a mechanical engineer. Over the 4 years of mechanical engineer, he was very sure that he wants to get into computer science because he coded a lot. Transition may on paper seem like mechanical engineering to computer science very normal. But when you go into the application process, all schools have 3 strict requirements of algorithms, data structures, operating systems, and a couple of programming courses as the base requirements for even admission. And when these kind of requirements are there and you're not meeting as part of your university degree, no matter whether you do some online course, they'll not accept. It means you have to do some credit-based course from some university online, and that research and then completing the course will require time. Hence, the 2-year window I advised in the first place. In that case, the first thing to do is shortlist your schools. Whenever you're aiming for career transition, the first step is shortlist your schools. Read the fine print of eligibility requirements, figure out a way to meet those requirements, and then apply.
Understood.
For instance, we get a lot of doctors who, for some reason or the other, want to get out of the clinical field after completing their MBBS. There are different degrees that are designed for them. Like I have a doctor who he said, I don't want to do one-on-one clinical service. I want to create a much impactful work where I can treat 1,000 patients at a time through some innovation I do. So then he came to me with this kind of expectations. I said, let's try to look into biomedical innovation program, which is a specialty offered in some US universities. So what we did is there are these programs that they take students only from multidisciplinary backgrounds. They take engineers also and they take doctors also collectively in the same batch. But what they expect the students to do is any engineering, they'll expect them to have some prerequisite courses done in biology. And same way, like for some doctors to do some quantitative and engineering related disciplines. So for that guy, we figured out an internship opportunity in IIT where he was working in a biomedical professor. He did that for 6 months, took a couple of online technical courses to get some engineering competency. We applied for that course. He did exceptionally well in the course. And then he designed a product which won him an award in the European Design Awards. And now he has a startup in Silicon Valley. And he has orders, very huge orders from US Air Force, US military. or just a simple respiratory device for emergency situations. So there are different ways in which you can transition. Just that you want to make sure that you take, and these candidates who want to transition require proper planning, for which a timeline is very important.
Right. And I think the more mature one gets, the more planful also one gets.
Yes,
And
yes.
they would usually have a bigger timeline. But I also see many people who declare that such and such school is their dream school just because it is one of the higher ranked schools in some ranking. So do you get a lot of those clients also? And then what is your advice to them?
Almost all clients are like that. At least because I serve with a lot of Indian clientele, the fascination with rankings is very high. And there is nothing wrong with that fascination. So, however, since I've studied myself over there, I realized that instead of getting into absolute ranking, whether this is rank 2 or rank 4, try to divide universities on bands. Okay, this is band 1, and club universities in band 1. There's band 2, there's band 3. If you go into those countries, you realize, okay, they are not differentiating between rank 2 and rank 6. It's in our mind that we are playing too much on it. So clubbing the universities on band, and the best way to band them together is based on their employment prospects, is generally what I advise the students to do. Okay, this is the career trajectories that you're going to get from these schools, and try to band it. And so let's say in my mind, the top 10 is the same band. 10 to 30 might be a same band, 30 to 50, and it's a big band as compared to what we are talking about for most of the countries. Like at least in US, which is like a huge academic setup where there are 4,200 universities at least. Within the top 100, you can easily band them in 3 bands or 4 bands max. So there's no need to have a hard one. Okay, he got into 20th rank and I got into 40th rank. My own personal example is when I was applying for my master's in engineering, I got into the 5th rank university and I got into 25th rank university. Those to go to 25th rank university is because it was half the cost. Okay, and if you see my career outcome, it was exceptional in the sense before even I could complete the degree, I recovered my entire cost because of internships, on-campus opportunities like TARA. So the ROI was zero if I were to, because by the time I had some surplus actually, by the time I concluded my degree. So being strategic in that context really helps.
Yes, and I wonder why more people don't think that way. So I see students feeling very bad if they got a reject from a very high ranked university, and therefore they discount the achievement of getting to the university they got in, maybe with the scholarship as well. So I think the prestige factor, the perceived prestige, of course, the big brand names everyone knows, but even otherwise, I think that's how the rankings get such a foothold in a person's mind. You think that that's equal to prestige, and prestige in turn is equal to ROI, roughly. So that's not true, is it? As your example itself illustrated, the 25th ranked university was the wiser move because practically loan free you did your education, therefore. Do you see students making this error, and then how do you talk to them if they do? Thinking that no matter the scholarship from a lower ranked university, I'll still go with the more branded one and I'll take a big loan for that, and that's okay with me.
So when it comes to working with us, when students started, they start with the mindset that we are talking about. They are like very, very influenced by the perceived prestige value of the university. But by the time they spend that 6 to 8 month window with us in terms of the application process, during those interactions, we cover all these points in detail. We get into the ROI window. And when they get the admissions outcome in hand, my simple advisory is to them, okay, don't take my decision that I'm telling you go to this one or this one. You speak to students from both the schools through online LinkedIn. It's easy nowadays to do that. The moment they do that, most of them are always on the right track. Some kids are very coming from a financial background. They don't care whether the ROI window extends by 6 months. They're like, okay, I'm willing to pay that because I want that prestige value to stay with me throughout. So every situation again is different. But most of the time when you speak, the best way to offset this is speak to students from graduating from all those programs that you're admitted to. That's when you come to know, okay, you had a lot of misconceptions about employments like this and this. They're giving me different feedbacks from what I perceived it to be. I'll give you a very other example also. Okay, I had a student, she got into a Darden MBA. Her net cost was coming around almost 1.5 CR for the MBA. Okay, and I have a student, and she herself got into Rotman MBA, which is Canada's #1 MBA with like almost 60-80% scholarship. So it was like barely 30 lakhs max. the entire cost. Now, this is Canada's number 1 MBA, this is US number 8 MBA. She said it's a no-brainer. I think I'll go to Canada's Rotman MBA. And I said, let's hold on. We don't have to decide. We have a 1 month window to commit to either of the two schools. My suggestion is when you speak to students from both the schools, you'll ultimately land with that and MBA, even if it's costing you. And she already had a home loan of around 1 CR in her name. She's going to take another 1.5 CR loan just for the MBA. So, and I said, and despite knowing that situation, I said, wait, my advice is most likely when you speak to students from both the schools, you'll end with the Darden MBA. She did that, and she ultimately went to a Darden MBA. And that's when, and now she had 8 offers within 6 months of landing into the program, 8 internship offers, including the top 3 consulting firms MBB. She converted a couple of them into the full-time also, even before completing the program and doing internship. So that's the value. So it is not always like cheaper is better. One has to get into the context of the situation and then only decide. So there's no singular way to think about it. Only when you understand the employment prospects, what you want to attain from the career, then only you can decide what is best for you.
Right. So this person who had already a 1 CR loan and now she was taking another 1.5 CR. So at that moment, it played out beautifully, but at that moment when she was signing on that education loan form, she was exposing herself to financial risk. It played out, and usually I think it does. For education, the ROI is good. It's a great investment that one can make in their career. But have you seen that financial risk actually materialize, some horror stories or something, some scenarios in which things can go wrong with people, and therefore scenarios that people should maybe consider when making their decision?
Now, it may sound too good to be true, but honestly, over the years that I've worked with students, touch wood, and I'm having a healthy night's sleep every night. Nobody has had a very critical situation like that. Okay.
Great.
And there are multiple layers and checks and balances in this entire journey for a student. The financial system is also designed in a way they'll not give you a loan only if the degree's ROI is low. Okay, and she got a home loan on herself, and then she got an education loan, but without any collateral because the person granting the loan knows the value of the degree. There are enough checks and balances that avoid you, that stop you from making such critical mistakes. However, there are people who put collaterals for random degrees. I've heard about cases, random degrees like MA International Relations sometimes. I'm not saying it's a random degree, but you have to study the employment prospect. It may not be as strong as any other STEM degree.
Right.
And then you invest like 1 CR in that degree, and then if you're taking against it your own, like a mortgage against your own home, then those are we actively discourage such decision making.
Right.
Because you need to know what is the probability of you getting a year return, and it should be a very high probability by default.
Right. So I think the sense I'm getting is that it's again the people who have a clear reason why they are doing this. They are the ones who will get the most out of their education abroad, whether in terms of ROI, whether in terms of the learning. The people who are applying just because maybe they think that as natural, or they haven't really thought it through. So they would be the ones who would be at the more risky side of things. I think that's what
I would put it like this. See, because counseling is a very, very subjective thing. And Jimit and I have first thing when we started is we're going to be very ethical about it. And we make sure that whatever money we want to make, we make is a bread and butter, understand. But it should not be at the expense of students' career, students' life saving, family savings. And we have to safeguard that first. And then whatever we can make around it, it's okay. So that way, at least the students we worked with, we were able to limit their exposure to financial risk properly. However, because counseling is a way where people can get murky with the advisory, there are people, and I've heard of stories, very, very difficult stories to digest also, where people have there are a lot of these universities who give commission to counselors, and we are not in that angle, but that kind of counselors will oversell something. They'll tell you, no, you go to this school, you'll get jobs and you'll get recovery and all. And despite the era of Google, people are not well informed, many of them. Okay. and they take the wrong decision. And I've heard then they have to work all those odd jobs and take the financial stress. Although our exposure to such students are very limited, but I have heard stories that, so that's where it's very critical. You have a counselor always, but doesn't mean you stop using Google and LinkedIn. Do not take anybody's, including my word, at the face value. You should always validate as much as you can. Do not follow anybody blindly in this business, because I have seen a lot of people and easily getting into this without even the right context. Some people are doing it with the right ethics, but not the right information. Also, they are sometimes misguiding, and it is very, very difficult. And I'm not saying it's their fault or something, but it is the student responsibility, the student's family responsibility to make sure they have done their background work.
Right. But so Deepak, I think the very subjectivity of this field makes it, so thinking from a student's perspective, so if one gets a good consultant, that's a great help in their journey. But how does one know that the consultant is good? So for example, if let's say I want to go to HPS and now you are telling me I don't really, my chances are slim, and someone else is saying I will make it happen, I will be predisposed to go to that person, like that person, because he is showing faith in me and you're not showing faith in me. So how can one judge better the consultant they work with?
I think you hit the right note with this question, because I've lost a lot of students like that. Because I have been, and I have a little bit of a bad name in the sector, that I'm very cutthroat and very brutal in my advisory. When I say the prospects are very low, I don't sugarcoat it. And there are a lot of counselors, due to business compulsions also, who clearly say, outrightly lie on your face that you have a healthy chance. And I would rather be very circumspect about, if there is a 10% chance, I'll try to say 10% chance, but every year the competition is increasing, and I'll say I'll make it 8. People who are actually on a 10% make it 90%. It's just easy to say, no, okay, there's a chance, we should try, there's a high possibility. And there are so many who are succumbing to this kind of false advisory. And I'll revert back to my original advisory of LinkedIn profile stalking. If you do it, the best you'll understand who is being genuine with you. That's where, when choosing counselor also is a very, very critical decision, where the student needs to empower himself. And two ways to go about it is, obviously, when you hear from word of mouth, somebody has done it well. Our entire model works around that only. So if you see my journey, I started the first 2-3 years, we had 3 students, 5 students, 10 students. Now we are working with 400 students without spending a single dime on marketing ever. And if doing nothing, no TV ads, no ads we have done ever. That is only when the student, and they'll say, go blindly trust this guy is genuine, they'll not bullshit you. Whereas, so that's an organic way to go about this.
Great. Right. So I thought of another follow-up question to our discussion earlier about the ROI. In the calculation of ROI, do we naturally assume that the person is going to stay on for X number of years in that geography, and what is that X then? Or would the ROI possibly work? So again, I have in my mind someone who has gone there by taking an education loan. So the ROI is important, right? They need to pay it back, the loan. So might the ROI work if, let's say, they know that they will have to return to India after a few years, maybe because of the family obligations, maybe because of personal preference. So might the ROI work then as well if they have to return to India?
Okay, so ROI is very critical, and my entire advisory with students is always starting with, why this university, what is the ROI? And when it comes to students taking loans particularly, in our experience, we have seen the most common ROI number, anywhere assuming the scholarship factor involved, is between 6 months to 2 years. And there are some outliers who is less than 6 months, and there are some outliers who is like up to 2.5 years for most degrees, irrespective of the country. So I'll put it like this. Let's say you're going to UK, you invest less as compared to US, because the cost of degree is less over there, the tuition is there, but you make also relatively less. So the window remains the same across countries, across degrees, more or less. Education, tuition system is also designed in a way. And when you do the employment prospects, for most employable degrees I'm talking about, there are certain outlying degrees which may not have that kind of industry pull also. So when I'm saying employable degrees, almost all STEM degrees, management degrees fall into that category. Certain degrees which might be in the non-profit sector, education sector, educational leadership, where there is no ROI concept necessarily, because the expectation is not to get an employment, revert to your job or whatever you're doing, or an executive MBA, which are part-time positions also. So that's where the ROI window is not calculated. But for any employable degree where the employment is the primary goal, that's where an ROI is anywhere between, in our experience, 6 months to 2.5 years. And the ROI in the country that you're studying. So coming back to the point that you're asking, does it make sense to come back immediately? If you want to come back immediately, then you make sure that your investment is as less as possible.
Right.
By going to a higher scholarship sponsored school, a lower tuition fee school, where the possibility of getting an ARA is high, on-campus job is high. So you're recovering very fast. So in case there's a compulsion to come back, the investment is low. So you can, and obviously when you come into the Indian market with the right kind of degree and the right kind of skill set, you'll get a premium as compared to the domestic applicant pool.
Right. So 2 years is not that big a window, to be honest. So when I asked the question, the assumption that the question was born out of was that it may take, 8 to 10 years, etc. And therefore, someone whose family is calling them back to India, 8 to 10 years might not work. But 2 years, I think someone is going that would probably.
Yes, that duration of 2 years is very important. So any student who comes to me with the question of which country should I target? I said, first, if your intent is to get the recovery of investment, some students are very clear. I just want to go for the experience, come back, join my family business, or do whatever. Recovery is not that important. But for students who recovery is important, I said, then you first shortlist countries where there is a predefined 2-year post-study work permit basis the degree without any employer-sponsored visa. That's the critical advice. And that's why countries like US for STEM degrees, which have a 3-year post-study work permit. UK right now is offering 2-year post-study work permit. Canada is offering a good enough window. France, Germany, Ireland. These are the countries that are offering. Some countries that we discourage because they don't have good enough post-study work permit are some of the Scandinavian countries, Italy, Spain, where either 6 months, 1 year window, which is not sufficient to recover.
Great. So that's very pragmatic and good advice, I would say. Right. Coming into, so now we have a fair idea of how one should shortlist, and we have shortlisted maybe 6, maybe 12 programs. So how does one go about preparing their application, working on their essays? Let's begin with that. So in a particular round, how many of these shortlists can one plausibly target in one round? Because how much time will one particular set of essays take?
Oh, okay. So I'll now get into assuming we are going to get to the stage where student is starting to work on the actual application components.
Right.
In my opinion, essays is much easier job to do if your CV is in the right shape. So when a student works with us, we spend maximum time on the CV first, and that's the first stage in the entire process, because that creates an entire snapshot of your profile and whatever life journey you want to articulate to the admissions officer. Right kind of skill set. So the CV is most critical, and one should spend as much time as possible on working on the CV. Common mistakes a lot of students are making is making it more than one page. Almost all top schools are clearly mandated. In fact, Stanford clearly says unless you have more than 10 years experience or that many publications, you should not go above a one-page CV. But I have first year, second year bachelor's degree student coming with 3-page CV to me. So they want to write every small thing that they've done in every class. That is not acceptable. So CV is very, very critical, and making sure that you're showcasing the right kind of projects which are relevant to the degree. Don't clutter them with information that the admissions officer doesn't want to or is not interested into getting into. So if you've done mechanical engineering, you want to apply for computer science, don't give me 4 projects on mechanical engineering. Rather give me 3 projects or 2 projects on computer science that you've done. So shaping the CV in context of the degree you're applying is very critical. Once you do that, it will create a very solid base for you to work with the essays. Otherwise, you'll keep on feeling lost that if this element was not there in my CV, this element is not clearly showcased in my CV. And then we get to the stage of essays. Now, each school will have a different essay requirement. Some schools are easy on that front, some schools are very critical on that front. So that, and in this application process, the first school takes the longest window because we have to work on the CV, letters of recommendation, which are now common across all schools that you're going to apply to. And there is a statement of purpose articulating your short-term goals and long-term goals after a degree. And how is this degree relevant to attain those goals? And how is your background going to ensure that you'll do well in the degree? This is the critical points to be covered in the statement of purpose. And in my experience working with students, the most disagreement we get is everybody wants to articulate their life story in the statement of purpose. It is not a personal statement, it is statement of purpose. One needs to understand the difference. It's a very dry statement focusing on the technical things related to the degree. And so that is very important. Once you have these elements in place, I think you can target one school every week.
All right. Okay, great.
Or even more, actually.
The essay topics may be superficially different, but at their core, they all speak to these common elements. That's what you're saying?
No, the topics will be very different across schools. However, there will be a common essay centered around a goal statement.
Right. Yes.
That will be used across schools.
Yes.
So what are additional essays that are there per school that you have to tackle? So there might be only one essay question or there might be 4 essay questions. That changes from school to school, that parameter.
Yes, but so you think that those can be done. So once the SOP is taken care of, those other essay questions can plausibly be done within a week or so.
With an exception of very few schools, yes, you can.
Okay, and how many man hours do you have in mind when you say 1 week? So how much effort is the person putting in daily?
It's again a very subjective thing because everybody's writing comfort, thinking purpose is very different. Because we work with like exactly identical background students. One student, I told you about that student I worked with in 15-day window. Very straightforward thing. We get on a call, we tell him in 10 minutes what all to be covered in that essay. He writes it, he sends it to us, we improve the language flow, structure, everything that we can to the best of our potential. He just, if he has 1 to minor edits, which are factually in, and then submits. And there are some students who overthink it. Then they show it to 5 people. Then they show it to some bua in some country, and then they show. And then when the more cooks you involved, the more opinions you'll get, and the more opinions you try to reconcile, the more messy it becomes. Yeah. So if you've taken a consultant, our advisory is to try to trust that consultant because he's reconciled over the years 20,000 opinions while working in this process. So every student is different, but an efficient student who is to the point can do it easily within a week's window.
Great.
And there are people who will ponder on the same essay for a month also. So for everybody is a different student, and for that we advise, if you like to stay a little bit more and make sure everything is done, then you take a longer window. That's completely fine.
Great. One should trust their admissions consultant, but suppose one wants to take a second opinion, so it should not be of the BUA. Then whose should it be? So who would be a good person to share your SOP?
An ideal person would be a career mentor or a student from the target university or program.
Great.
So you can either reach out to a person on LinkedIn, try to build a rapport and show, hey, this is what I've written, any critical advisory that you have. Or somebody who is like, if I'm working in a particular setup, like I'm a design professional, I have a design mentor. I can ask him, hey, this is what I've written, any technicalities you recommend to improve, or is there any oversight? Those guys are the most valuable feedback for us to learn also too.
Right. Great. So for the essay, when we have, so like I think I already got a sense of the process that you follow through this example of the 15-day student. So you got on a call, you gave him pointers, and then he came back with the finished essay. So for someone who is writing on their own, what might be a process that they could follow so that the end result is a good essay? Right now, I have just read the question. I'm at total scratch. So what should be my process and what should be my mindset about what I am doing?
So there are 3-4 things that one who's doing this by himself should. First is always answer the question and not try to write something you want to say. Okay? This is a basic mistake most students are making. Because they think these are my achievements, I want to, and even if it is not relevant to the question, they want to dump it in that question. And that urge is very natural amongst most students. Keep on reading the question 20 times, and when you read the answer, you should make sure that you are answering the question to the point. This is very important. Number 2, attending the school events which are there online. Let's say a Masters in Business Analytics program at Duke University is conducting an online event for applicants. Attend that event. In that, they generally cover what all they expect in those essays. Take notes on that, so that those becomes your guiding instructions while drafting the essay. Number 3, try to look up online samples. The first source of samples should be the university website itself. If there's a unique essay, they like Duke ask for a question like 25 random facts about you. They have given 5 to 6 samples. So instead of going to some random untrustworthy source, you can always go on the actual website and see what sample is there. If not, then try to Google some good counselor's website and there maybe some samples and take some notes from it, but always keep using your judgment. Adding to that, another critical mistake most students make who have applied by themselves is the goal statement. Now, if I'm a finance student, okay, I'm working in, let's say, a normal bank in a corporate finance role. Then all of a sudden, I say I want to do a master's in finance degree from your university, and I'm aiming for a private equity role at so-and-so KKR, for instance. So what they don't do is they don't do the due diligence is how many private equity professionals have been employed from that program. So the goal and the program outcome are not in line. Then the university themselves are discouraged. Okay, this guy has not even done the basic research of whether we can employ in that kind of scenario that you're aiming at. That goal statement reality check is very, very important.
Right. Makes total sense. So now, given that there are the ATCOMs are doing all these evaluations, whether the person's goal statements were in line, how well answered and how to the point their essays were, and whether they make this person seem like a good candidate. So what's the role of the GRE GMAT scores? So the students who come to me, so many of them, they retake just to get, so I coach for the GRE. So let's say someone is at a 325 and they think that getting a +5 will significantly improve their chances, 330. And then is that true? Likewise, again, are there bands for, this much to this much score does lead to an improvement in chances, but beyond that, it doesn't. So what's the role of the GRE GMAT scores in the whole process?
They play a very critical role, no matter if the school is keeping it optional for most schools. One right now, since COVID, one tragedy that has happened is a lot of these schools have made it optional on paper, but is not optional in reality for an Indian applicant. At majority of the schools, they are not honoring that waiver. So I get a lot of these students. Michigan Ross has made a GMAT waiver. Darden has made a GMAT waiver. Why are we not applying? I said, we can apply. You want to? I would, but my advisories will not easily take in because off record our conversations are always like, I get 3,000 applications from India. I have to filter 30, 40. How will I do that? I have no choice but use at least GMAT and GRE as the one filtering criteria to shortlist to at least 1,000.
Right.
I'll get into the fine print of those.
Right.
Okay. Unless, and I'm not saying they are not honoring at all. Exceptional profiles where you are a folks 30 under 30 startup founder, they may honor. So get the context right. And even if they are saying and using the word, unless they're using the word we are GRE blind, they're using GRE optional, I would encourage you to take the test. Number one. Now, what score depends on the program. For a computer science program, the quant score is more important. And it's a band system there. It may not make a big difference whether a 325 or 330 as long as the quant is 170. But when I use the GRE to apply for an MBA school, it may actually make difference for some of the schools from a 325 to 331 because there are some unspoken filters that are there, although they are not reflected anywhere in the system, but they're using on the back end to filter criteria. So, for instance, I had a student with exceptional financial services background, working in investment banking, worked on largest IPOs in India. He was stuck with a GMAT of 680 for 5 attempts. And any school would have taken him with a 720, 730 GMAT. A couple of schools clearly told him, we are on the wait list. The moment you get that 720, 730, then only I can admit you. And in the same school, you'll see an American citizen who has not had half the professional accomplishments getting in with a 680 or 650 GMAT also. So as an Indian applicant, I would say it plays a critical role in getting you to the next stage of consideration. Not necessarily deal making. It won't guarantee an admission, but gets you to the next stage of consideration in the application process when you cross whatever predefined thresholds that the university has defined for that applicant pool.
Right. So it's more like a gatekeeper.
Yes.
Gets you into the long list, and then it's up to the rest of your profile.
Elements of the profile. So the thing is, you can have everything in the profile most of the time, and there is no absolute yes or no in this. I hope you understand. Because I
Yes.
mentioned there'll be a Forbes 30 under 30 scenario who might get into a top tier program without the GMAT theory.
Yes, agreed.
But the norm case scenario, when you're in that middle 90% of the applicant pool in terms of professional trajectory, academic trajectory, in that context, you should always look at the situation that GMAT, GRE plays a critical role in getting you to the next stage. It may not guarantee you an admission. So you may have all the strong academics and you don't have the right GMAT. You may not even get to the next stage.
Right. And so does the GMAT score also impact scholarship decisions?
It does. It heavily does in a lot of programs. But there's no way for me to generalize for all programs or some programs. So, for instance, in UT Dallas, there's a university in Texas, Dallas, which is a big hub for Indian students to apply to for a lot of management specializations, particularly business analytics, supply chain, finance. Till now, the trend has been if you have a 320 plus GRE, you get a flat 50% scholarship.
Okay, great.
And their entire scholarship decision is defined just on the GRE once you're admitted. And a lot of schools are clearly saying that we may consider you for admission, but not for scholarship if GMAT or GRE is missing.
Okay, so it does. And so it does make sense to spend in the time to improve one's GRE, GMAT scores if they are subpar at present.
For sure. So there are two ways to answer this question. By default, if you feel that you can handle the test, you should. But the positive part is because of the GMAT GRE waiver, there used to be candidates who never get into certain schools. For instance, over the last 2-3 years, when it comes to MBA space, for instance, Boston University, Rice University, Indiana University, these three universities have honored the GMAT GRE waiver very heavily for Indian applicants. Those students who are in Indiana MBA, Kelly MBA, which is like 18th ranked MBA, with 100% scholarship, one with 90% scholarship without a GMAT or GRE score. They took the test, they didn't get the required score. So, and that you'll come to that, I think that's where a consultant has a little bit of a edge as compared to just a plain vanilla candidate applying by themselves. Because I'm doing this for 10 years, I know how is it working with each school, who is honoring it, who is actually not honoring it.
Right. And so this practical decision of, I took my GRE attempt and right now my score is, let's say, 315, but I was getting 320, 322 on my mocks. Something happened on the test day, my score is below normal. But my R1 deadlines are also coming near. So now should I go ahead, because R1 is said to be the more higher chance of getting in round. So should I now go ahead in R1 with my subpar score, or should I rather defer my application to R2 and get in with apply with a better score?
So again, that's a very high frequency kind of situation that we face with almost all our students. And there is a natural tendency to push the GRE as much as you can to the deadlines. And so we find ourselves in this situation.
Yes.
So we work, and every day I'm dealing with students with these kind of situations. They're not hitting whatever mock test scores they were planning to hit. And that is creating an issue whether to do round 1 versus round 2. So now so there's no general answer. We need to gauge. So I go on a student to student basis to gauge what is the difference. If there's a difference of 2-3 points, maybe I would say, let's go ahead. Within that also, with regards to the degree we are applying, what is the quant score requirement? Some schools have a quant score minimum requirement. We then go into the school to school basis to read the fine print of the GRE requirements or averages that they mention, and then take a call whether to continue with this round or shift it. So there's no one straightforward. But if it's like 2 off, let's say my target was 320 and I'm getting a 307, my schools are in the top 20, top 30, then obviously by default it is round 2. But it's very close to 320, like a 316. Then I take a judgment call with the student after reading the fine print of the admission requirements of that university.
Yes, that's perfectly good advice. And so, but this is true that R1 chances are better than R2 chances?
In some schools, yes, but not all.
But not all. Okay. And how do these 2 round chances compare with the later rounds, R3 or?
R3 is like a jackpot round. If you get it, it's considered to be a jackpot. By default, R1 and R2 for most schools, which is the October-November round, which is the R1, and R2 is January. Ours, we have barely seen any of this, and I have actively discouraged students when it comes to MBA, at least, or some of the critical master's program. I told them don't even apply in round 3, because what happens is it creates challenges for the next year when you apply, because you are a re-applicant, and then the burden is on you in next 6 months. What significantly different that you have done to justify an additional essay.
Right. And in terms of scholarship, the chances of getting scholarships, do the R1s stand?
Yes. There
even
is,
compared to R2?
although I don't have any statistics to prove it, there's no way we can have those statistics. But there, in certain schools, there is some a higher scholarship prospect in applying earlier on. But with that being said, one should not compromise. See, scholarship is the second stage in the process. First stage is getting the admission.
Yes.
My advice is, student, don't think about solving a problem which is not going to be there in the first place. First, solve the immediate problem. So I tell them, just because round 1 has certain merit, but our profile is still not there, don't submit. Submit in a round where you have the strongest chance. That I try to negotiate with the student on a one-on-one basis.
Great. Right. So now, working so closely with students over these months now, applying to different schools is an expensive process. It's also, one can easily work themselves into this feeling of, oh, my future hangs on this, etc. And so therefore, make it a very high anxiety situation for themselves. Does that happen a lot? And if yes, then how do you counsel the students regarding that?
And unfortunately, it's a very expensive process. That's the harsh reality of it. Okay. Yesterday only, I was speaking to a student who was under extreme duress, and he was like, and he was calling me frantically unscheduled for 2 to 3 times, and that I understand. And I'm a little cold that way. I will not pick up because I'm writing somebody else's essay right now. I did your time. And then I said, then when I called him back, I was like, why are you calling me so in such a panic mode? So there's a video essay that I need to do. I said, we'll do it. We have 4 days. Don't stress about it. So he's like, sir, there is no way for me to not stress. My bank balance is negative. I have invested my entire time because I don't have money to do anything. I'm doing everything on this only. Okay, so there are situations like that which also us then puts the entire situation. Okay, I said I took a very cold approach with the student initially. I should have been more empathetic sometimes, but it gets very critical, and this is the MBA deadline week also. It very critical for us to also timeline. But yes, it is what it is. The best way you can do this is plan everything in advance. A lot of the schools, I will not say a lot of the schools, but some of the schools are offering application fee waiver. When you attend one of their online events, or you go to certain events organized in a physical manner, you get an application fee, or you get an endorsement from an alumni of a school. That instead of panicking or being sad about it, go to the fine print of the university website, application requirements page, application fee page, and see what options are these universities offering. Some of them are offering beyond the top 10, like the Harvard Wharton, they are not offering anything. Other ones like Duke, there are, but you need to plan 2-3 weeks in advance to get that fee waiver. So you save that $200, which is a significant amount. So $250, which is a significant amount right now. As a student when you're applying. So yes.
Right. So throughout your conversation, Deepak, the sense I've got is luck favors the prepared mind. The person,
it is always like that. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, it is. The more prepared you are, no matter how faulty you are in the process, the more time you get to correct those mistakes, or for me to help you correct those mistakes.
Right. Because so like attending the events, then looking at the fine print, all of this requires a lot of intention, lot of effort and planning. I mean, the person would be working, so they need to be very systematic about how they manage their off time so that they can utilize it well and therefore do well throughout the process and navigate it confidently.
Absolutely. And this is very critical for somebody who is not surrounded by that ecosystem of applicants. Let's say I'm working in an investment banking firm. I have 20 seniors who I've seen over 1 year. Who look up pura process I've shadowed because I'm a junior to them 1 year. I've seen them. We apply career. This is the recommenders rush they are following. This is the events they are attending, and they serve as mentors also to me during the process.
Great.
Okay. Those guys have significant advantage. Somebody surrounded like from an engineering setup applying for an MBA program. Generally, the number of students applying for MBA in that team would be significantly less as compared to an IB team. That's where that's where the familiarity with the process is very important, not just the timeline. And if you're not familiar with the process, you need to start early.
Yes, yes. And I think here maybe extroverts may have a bit of an advantage because they would be more likely to reach out to alum from some school they are targeting on LinkedIn. They may perhaps look for a buddy in the process online on some forum. I am applying, I want to apply some. So the introverts, they tend to be on their own, and then they may end up working in a silo and therefore maybe at an informational disadvantage.
I would not disagree with it fully, but there are introverts. I have my students who are introvert or who are extremely sharp. I'm an introvert by nature.
So am I. That's why I even thought of this.
Then I know then I know my task is cut out for me. Then I have to interact through email with the right kind of people. I'll focus all my energies, not just talking, but researching a lot more. Candidates also then find something much more relevant too. So, but yeah, speaking to people is very important in this process, whether introvert or expert, you have to reach out.
Right.
The more you reach out, the more awareness you will have. And it's not just, you have to understand no consultant is God who will know about every school what is valued in detail. We'll also be our students. You come to me 1 year in advance. Best way to do this is when you're working on a Wharton MBA essay, I want you to reach out to LinkedIn Wharton MBA students 10 to 20. Tell me what is happening in their program. I'll include those in their essays. I need that support from the student too. Introvert or extrovert, we don't take that into account, but you have to reach out. So professional networking and academic networking is very, very critical in the process.
And so you would, I'm sure, push your students to do it. But in terms of the people who come to you, how many have tend to do this on their own? How many have done some of it on their own? I'm just trying to get a general sense of the applicant pool. What fraction of people actually attend the events or reach out to alums, etc.?
As I mentioned, it's a very mixed crowd that I have. Okay, because if you see, I mentioned that we worked with around 400 students last year who went abroad this year in August for their studies. And I met at least 1,000 plus students for their appointments. It's a very mixed crowd I get. As I mentioned, there is somebody who's very academically, but one common theme amongst most of the crowd we have is they are all academically motivated. They are very sure they want to do this. They are doing it for the right reasons, most of them. However, because everybody comes from a different background and different setups, they all have information advantage, disadvantage. Information advantage, disadvantage. And somebody who has that advantage by being surrounded by the right kind of people always has a leg up in the process, but it's not something that you can't cover up in 2 months advice.
Right. Yes, I think it's just that knowing this itself is good, because then if I know that I am not surrounded by such people, I am in a silo, then I can consciously make it a gap that I want to cover.
Exactly. And that's what I do with students also. Whenever I'm working with a student starting May, so I get, yesterday, like 12th of September, NCR deadline was there. And after the application, they have a 2-day window to submit a video essay. And this is randomized 4 questions. They ask any random questions. And I get a lot of Army Navy officers also who have 20 years experience, 21 years experience to work with us on those MBA applications. So that Army Navy officer who is very senior, he's actually a few years older to me also. He said, okay, I submitted the application. Now I'm going to record the video and submit it. I said, hold on. And these guys are very precise. They are like, the military precision, how they are. They're very disciplined in their approach. They submit the application also 10 days in advance. The NCR application was at least complete 20 days in advance. And he was rushing me, sir, I'm submitting today. I said, I've not reviewed it, will not submit it. Every day I was delaying it. I said, let's start about the video essay first. So that's where I know the candidate background. No? He's coming from a military background. His corporate exposure is not that wide. So I know he may falter in the interview as compared to a corporate student. For him, the training window is longer for that interview practice. So I said, and they want to rush it. They want to get it done. It's a check mark. Get it done. I said, no, it doesn't work like that. So I delayed his entire application form review till the date. So he gets the maximum window to prepare. So he prepared also. He wanted to do it by himself. I said, no, I will take 2 calls at least with you, and it's not a choice. He's like, I don't like going to the grind of being evaluated on every small thing I'm talking about. And then, so there are these things that every candidate has different. I said, no, sorry, it is not a choice. We have to do this. I did those 2 rounds, and yesterday night only I got his message. I'm very thankful to you. If you're not given that structure to the thought process that I had for majority of the questions, I would have faltered significantly and compromised my entire application.
He was fortunate to have you, someone who could see their weakness, that of course we all are oblivious to our own weaknesses. So
self-evaluation in the process is very critical. How familiar you are with it, and coming and it's very common. When I applied, there was no Google era, and I trusted my counselor. But whatever Google I could do, I realized, okay, the counselor is not feeding me all the right information. The essay also I got was the first Google essay I got, and it was a heart-wrenching moment. And as a student, you're also limited in your potential, because how much I'm doing this for 12 years. So now I know in and out about a lot of things. I can read an essay in a minute and tell you what are the factual errors with the essay. A student will not be able to do that. So getting that awareness as much as you can to the best of your potential is very critical.
Right. Okay, so my closing question would be, so we have throughout talked about how the planning and giving yourself a lot of time is important. So I think someone, let's say, who is in the first year of their engineering right now in India, and they know that they will most likely go abroad for studies for their masters. So now they do have a lot of time, and of course, college, you do have a lot of downtime as well. So for a sincere student who is already fairly sure that they will go abroad, what's the best use that they can make of these 3 years, so that when they start to apply, they have a leg up from someone who just decides then that they want to apply?
So, two common advisory applies to students across disciplines. Anybody, I have this profile mentorship system also that I work with students who are as early as 1 year, first year in their degree. I give you a couple of cases also here. So anybody who's coming me in the initial years of their bachelor's degree, assuming planning for their master's, first thing I tell them is GPA. It's a non-negotiable element in the entire process. You make sure that the GPA is as high as possible. Okay. If it's on a scale of 10, a 9 plus is considered to be healthy, a 9.5 plus is considered to be excellent. So unless you have that element, no matter what GMAT, GRE, what profile elements, you'll be at a disadvantage in the process. Number two is plan your GMAT and GRE well in advance and get it out of the way in an academic schedule which is not demanding. When you try to club everything together, in the final year, what happens, every degree has more advanced coursework, project requirements, then you have the application pressure, then the GMAT, GRE, TOEFL, IELTS, everything all together in that 1.5 year window. Try to get that plan in advance. Number three, then that advisory varies on degree to degree that you're applying for. For instance, you're applying for an engineering degree. Now, within that, there are two elements. One is the thesis-based degree or a non-thesis-based degree. Try to answer which element you're going towards. If you're going for a thesis-based degree, I would say that is very important and critical for us to create a research portfolio, maybe a couple of publications. If you're going for an applied nature of the degree, which is non-thesis-based, then internship exposure at recognized companies globally is very important element. And whether it's an MBA student, then a student leadership might be an important element. Now, there's something called as deferred MBA. I'll give you an example of a student. Now, deferred MBA, I had two candidates. Deferred MBA is something where you get an admission into a top-tier school when you're in the final year of your bachelor's degree. And in India, an unspoken truth is 90% of candidates are always from IIT or University of Delhi. And there is 10% elements that you see from random other colleges. I had a student who was very passionate about doing it. And he's like, I want to do it. I'm here 2 years in advance. Help me realize it. That goal. His GPA was healthy, 8.8 or something, which is okay for an MBA school. It's not a requirement. So I said, now 2 years you are, I can give you advisory, but if you don't implement the advisory, there is no result that we're going to attain. But we told him strategically, we kept on adding internships. We added 8 internships in a 2.5 year window. And that internship project trajectory was from technical to management, and there was an underlying theme to it, and they were all at good institutes, coveted institutes. With that, from a University of Mumbai engineering degree, he got into Columbia deferred MBA, where there are less than 7 students from India. So you can overcome all the hurdles of IIT, non-IIT degree, all those with proper timeline and planning. And he had a GMAT of 730. And then I had another IIT student who is IIT Delhi rank 2 holder. He got into all deferred MBA because his profile was already strong with a 770 GMAT. So as I mentioned, everybody's journey will be different. Everybody's journey will be unique. But you can all have the luxury to have the same goal as long as you're willing to put the differential effort as needed.
Great. Yes, and that's a great phrase, as long as you're willing to put in the differential effort to close the gap between the people
Yes,
who
because
are.
everybody will come from a different starting point in the race. You need to cover that difference for the same goal. Yeah.
Right. So thank you, Deepak. This was a fabulous conversation. Thank you for letting me pick your brains. And I'm sure that the applicants who watch this would have got a lot of great takeaways from our conversation. Thank you for sharing your experience so candidly with us.
Thanks, Japinder, for having me. I'm really grateful for sharing these insights with the students.